brother! And welcome everyone to our spoiler review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Man, I have got to tell you that I am so excited to talk about this movie today because I have honestly felt like the MCU has been kind of letting me down a little bit coming into like each consecutive new movie. So I feel in my expectations, I think following the Infinity Saga were so high and they sort of had to recalibrate, refine a new home. Going into this movie, I literally had just dropped my expectations to nothing, to the point where it was just like, I'm just going to go and see the movie and eat popcorn. And I'm excited to tell you how I felt about it.
All right, is this maybe the best Marvel movie since the Infinity Saga? I am very excited to hear what you in particular have to say about it, because as we were watching the movie, I was like, oh man, Ben is gonna have so many thoughts. This is hitting so many Ben drums in this movie. There's a tremendous amount of talking about utopias and paradises, a whole lot of imposter syndrome.
Oh my gosh.
Just a lot. So I don't know. What'd you think?
Dude, I gotta say, I think I'm just gonna reveal my hand right away. Yeah. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I really did, and I thought that it hit on all of the things that you love from a Guardians movie.
Yes.
Most specifically. And it was really interesting because you go into all of these movies and we've gotten so accustomed to those expectations set by the huge team ups, the Avengers, the Endgame, Infinity War, all that type of stuff. Everything you want to have these massive overarching implications, and how will all of the other characters be impacted by the events that we saw inside of this movie.
Right.
And I would say none of that was on my mind at all throughout the whole movie. I just watched it as a Guardians movie. I almost even think I wasn't watching it as a Guardians sequel. I think it literally as a standalone movie.
Yeah, it was just good.
Provides a lot. I mean, with the small exception of some of the runway type of plot lines, like Gamora and Quill.
Yeah.
We're obviously
you did need to know a little bit about that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But so much of it, I was not finding myself throughout the course of the movie really struggling with that question of well, they just introduced that new plot element, or this new weapon, or this new planet that we went to, or this kind of species. How will that fit into the greater Marvel universe?
Yeah, they did a good job of making the villain, the High Evolutionary, this very big galactic or galaxy sector threat almost.
Yeah.
But the whole thing was brought unto himself just because he wanted to get Rocket back, but it wasn't he was out. It wasn't they had to hunt him down because he was doing something bad. It was just they found him, and because they found him, now they had to stop him.
Even the way that the character of the High Evolutionary was structured was really cool, because one of the things you do also run into again with these Marvel movies is that escalating threat level being higher and higher and higher each time, and it's well, how do we go bigger? How do we go better? How do we beat Thanos? It's it didn't really feel like that question was in play. You could tell why this character was formidable. You understood what his goals and intentions were, but at the same rate, he's oddly nerfed at the same time by being kind of incredibly powerful. And especially when you have that scene with Adam Warlock where he throws him against the wall, and Warlock just went in and ravaged all of nowhere.
Yeah.
You're okay, this dude's got some game. Don't mess with him.
Right.
But also he's failing epically in his mission to create this utopia.
Right.
All throughout the way. And a really hilarious and comedic and very on the nose for the Guardians kind of way.
Yeah, it's so weird too, because he's failing, but at the same time, it's failing at creating a utopia, but succeeding in so many other ways that he is blind to.
Yes.
It's dude, you just found a way to force a species to evolve in 10 seconds. That's already amazing. And it's no, that's not why. It's okay. That's worthless to me.
Well, hilariously though, I even feel this was one of the cool things about it as well, was that you get the huge Rocket Raccoon backstory,
yes,
which was the whole way through. I loved every second of it. I thought it was super cool. I thought it gave so much more depth to that character. But the other thing that you learn about Rocket, which I thought was really fascinating, was that as an entity, as a character, he is even smarter in some ways than the High Evolutionary. Like he can solve problems that he can't. But then also Rocket then like meaning that Rocket is smart enough to be a supervillain is for all intents and purposes like what that takeaway is. But then Rocket has these other like strange and odd gaps where like, you know, it was never important for anybody to instill him with like knowledge about like what the sky is like.
Right.
You know, so he's like a rocket scientist that doesn't know what the sky is.
Yeah.
You know, in this really like kind of interesting way. So I think it also speaks to this idea of like, and I've seen this with like people that I know out there in the real world where you can like ask them a question about like a politically charged topic or whatever, and they can like answer it like succinctly in a way that like makes sense. And I'm like, why are you not like a politician or something? It's like, because I have no desire to be. And it's like, just because I can answer your question doesn't mean like I want to go and do something with that.
Right.
And I feel like that's what you end up having with Rocket is like insanely smart, insanely capable, like very valuable as an asset, especially if you're somebody like the High Evolutionary. But then he's not taking those abilities or skills or anything and trying to then become even a superhero.
He's basically just, most of his missions until he meets the Guardians are just self-serving. Like almost, I guess he must be doing a fair amount of crime because when you meet him, he's broken out of like 22 prisons or something.
Right.
So I guess he keeps getting caught doing whatever he's doing.
Right, but then can always, which again, you know, if you go back to the High Evolutionary, it's the same thing. It's like super powerful, but also this like layer of like incompetence like underneath it.
That's probably one of honestly, the High Evolutionary is probably one of the prisons he's referencing breaking out of.
Oh, almost certainly.
That's
probably
very
the
clever.
first
probably
ever
the first
prison.
one.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a good like tie-in. It's like, oh, of course he's breaking into prison. That's what he does. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But you're right. Like he also has like gaps in knowledge. Like the running joke the whole time is that he keeps saying like, I'm not a raccoon, and people keep calling him that. And it's like, it turns out, yes, you are.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah. That was like one of those interesting little tidbits where it was kind of like the way that he like ultimately ends up learning that piece of information. But like that's a strange one about identity as well. And I don't even know that like my brain has fully been able to to process what the implications of that sentiment even are.
Yeah.
You know, like because certainly all of us out here in the real world may think certain things about ourselves, and it could be that underlying theme of like imposter syndrome or something.
Yeah.
Or embracing more about like your true nature in some capacity. Because Rocket at the end of the day was so manufactured as well as just being a simple raccoon.
Yeah.
That like it's hard to know like which one of those identities ultimately like wins out. But
so he's struggling the whole time, I think, or maybe most of his life, I think, feeling like knowing obviously now via the flashback that he was like I think he says in one of the other movies like, I didn't ask to be made.
Right.
Yeah. So he says that at one point, and then in this one, like you can tell that he was made by a bad person.
Right.
It's like, I didn't ask to be made, and I was made by a bad person, so like I must be bad, or like I shouldn't exist.
Right.
Sort of thing. But it's like, but then they have that line, I guess when he's in sort of the limbo area talking back to Lila.
Nice.
Yes. Pulling it out.
Otter?
Lila the otter.
Yeah.
When she's like, I guess she explains it really well, and she's like, there's the hand that makes you, and then the hand that guides the hand, or something.
Oh yeah.
It's just like, just because like, and that's sort of like this weird problem with like the High Evolutionary. It's like, you have done like a very weird thing, like in making this planet and trying to make this utopia, and it's like, I don't know if like you were like ethically sound in doing it, but now there are real people here, so maybe you need to account for that now.
Right, yeah. I mean, like it was still a huge, like he created the world that he then ultimately destroys, and it's still a tragedy when he destroys that world.
Right.
You know, it's like there were still people living there.
Right.
And they were still having like an existence that like was good.
Right.
But yeah, it's like, I mean, that just goes to show, I mean, probably like a massive, God, there was such a good line. I keep thinking that as I'm talking, it will like come to me in my head. But it was essentially that thought of like you want everything to be perfect when things are perfect just the way they are type of, like that's like the feeling.
What Rocket says to him at the end.
Yes.
He's like, yeah, you're not trying to make things perfect. You just don't like the way things are.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And I thought that was like a really powerful, you know, piece of sentiment as well, because like you said, one of the topics that I get particularly like stuck on is this notion of a utopia, like this notion of like, what is the best version of our world? What is the best version of the world where there isn't conflict and people live in like harmony and peace, and like, you know, what all comes, like what would be required for that world, you know, to exist in some kind of way. And I felt like, you know, like I go back to like The Matrix or like the book The Giver or even like WALL-E, where they're all like living aboard the Axiom, and like your entire existence is essentially like having robots cater to your every need because nobody needs to do any jobs whatsoever. And it's like, but is there fulfillment in doing something you're good at?
Right. You know, and that's like what WALL-E argues. It's like, it's not enough to live. It's like, I don't want to survive. I want to live. So
exactly.
It's like, is the point of life surviving or is the point of life living?
Right. But so it's interesting to me because I think like the big question for me forever, and I feel like this movie actually did a really fantastic job of like maybe making me feel better about it, is like, is our goal as a society, as a world, utopia? And it almost felt like what the message of this movie was like, not really, no.
Yeah.
like don't ask for that, because that's not really like what we're after, you know, and that would not be the world that we would necessarily want. But so anyway, yeah, I thought it was like a very interesting a premise. I think it gave the High Evolutionary lots of layers, and I think it really fitted nicely with like what almost started or almost felt like a side quest for the Guardians to be like, okay, we need to go and get this thing to like save Rocket. And then it was like, oh, that's the whole movie. Yeah.
It's sort of like intro, Rocket gets injured. Then they have like the whole first act where they're on like the Orga Corp or whatever. Just like the gross planet. Oh my gosh. You're going to talk about that for a sec. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I was going to say like typically, and I can't even remember where I wrote this down in my notes, but like typically that type of like, world would gross me out. And I don't know what it was, or if they walked the finest of lines, or they just executed it really well, or maybe it just fits the theme of like the goofy, quirky Guardians vibe. But I was like, it's weird. There's no doubt that it's weird.
Oh, it's weird.
But like, you know, it's like, you know, it almost looked like they were standing on like skin on like a microscopic level, and there's like that squelchy, really like uncomfortable noise, but it worked.
What really made it stand out to me about how well it was working, because like they were very self-aware about how gross it was.
Absolutely.
Like
yes.
The movie knows that you, the viewer, thinks it's gross, but it's almost like the characters like know people are watching and think it's gross or something.
Sure, yeah.
Like
yeah.
I don't know what they were telling him, but what you can tell they were doing it really, really well, because they tried to do the exact same thing in Quantumania.
I was gonna say the same thing
and did not.
Yeah.
They did not get it. They were. I mean, they almost said the exact same thing where he's like, I put my hands in the tubes or blah, blah, blah. And it was just like, I see what you're trying to make it funny that it's gross, but it's normal, but you're just making it look gross and weird. And in this one, it was like, it is so funny that it is like this like no one's addressing the grossness of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and I feel like Quantumania, they did like 11%. You know, like they were sort of like, yeah, like some stuff in this microscopic world is going to be like unusual and strange and like whatever. This was like the whole planet,
whole thing,
down to like Nathan Fillion randomly showing up, which was
oh my gosh.
I thought for sure that was gonna be like a 4-second cameo, and I was like, he's just an actual character in this movie right now. But they're like the carapace suits, and
I know I did not the suits were just they were throwing me a little. I was like, they're like at first when they show you those little dudes like floating around outside of the planet, I'm like, okay, that's what that species is, got it. And then it's like, no, you see them with their masks off. So whatever they're wearing is just, they're just wearing that because that's what they're wearing. And we're not going to address it. It just sort of looks like weird blocky muscles, I guess.
Right, yeah. It's like the Michelin Man meets insects or something.
Don't know. Yeah, so that was sort of a weird thing. But you're right. Like that Marvel does such a weird thing with certain actors where they'll show up and you'll be like, this is, okay. The thing is, you could have had Nathan Fillion play probably anyone you wanted to. He could probably just ask to play a role because everyone loves him, and it's like a sci-fi thing. And it's Marvel, and it's like, and this is how the entire MCU decided to use Nathan Fillion, was to put him in this funny suit for like 10 minutes.
We played that card.
We played it. We did it.
We have done the Nathan Fillion thing.
Yeah, we've done it.
So that was hilarious and random and weird, but like, you know, I thought it was funny that he kept talking about like his one henchman. Like there were a bunch of good running gags like that.
Oh my god.
Throughout the thing, like,
like dropping Mantis on her head for some reason was a gag.
Right, yeah. So
I don't know why.
I wonder if it happened accidentally one time, and then they were like, it's just kind of funny.
Let's just keep doing it.
Yeah. We'll just keep having that happen. Yeah. So in case you didn't notice, that was the other thing. So speaking of the weird stuff, is like even like the way that like Nebula kept having like just like everybody was having like an arm broken, like just completely sheared, or like, Nebula's neck is just literally bent backwards.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, oh, that's weird. Like I was getting throughout the whole movie, I kept getting like Sid from Toy Story's room vibes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Sid vibes, especially in the Rocket flashbacks.
Oh my gosh, like the little bunny that's
the
like
bunny,
floor.
Floor. You're laying on the floor, so your name is Floor.
It's like, but then they just like stuck to the names, and it was like, all right, that's fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, could you have imagined a world where you had seen a depiction of any of those creatures and was like, these guys are gonna die, and when they die, you might cry. And it's like, I think I'll be okay.
Yeah.
I think I'll be okay. And then it was like, oh my gosh, why?
So why?
What are they doing?
They killed Teef? No!
Not Teef! Yeah, no, so, no, I thought all that was really, really cool and interesting. With my tiniest, and this is not even a criticism, it's just, I just thought it was interesting that it was slightly different, was that all of them seemed a lot more, like rebuilt, like with custom parts and stuff than Rocket is. And that may just be like one of those things where it's like, well, he's a mad experiment man and does these things, and so that's it.
This is just how Rocket looked.
Yeah. Gotta say the High Evolutionary, his face being like rubberized, pulled back,
stretched back like that,
and then like at the end, like it comes like undone and it's like flapping in the breeze, and like they like go and like pull. I'm like, is this happening right now? Like this feels like a peek behind the curtain where you're seeing like the costume come off or something. I know.
Also, let me just say they missed a tremendous opportunity to reuse the face-off joke.
I know.
I could not believe
it's so true. It's a face-off.
They didn't say it was a face-off,
and it was like, and then there was like a little literal face-off.
And then they literally took someone's face off and they didn't say it. So anyway, not a big deal or anything, because it was also just a pretty dramatic moment. Right. I thought he was going to be like robotic underneath, not like just gross skull underneath.
Right, but I guess that was from where like Rocket had basically like just completely disfigured him upon his like escape. So he like rebuilt his own image ish.
Right.
In this very uncomfy way.
Very gross. Yeah. But like the effect was like pretty good. Like it looked like there's something wrong with that guy's face, man.
Right. So now the other thing that I guess we were introduced to, and this would be like one area where I was like, I can't tell, because this movie is long.
It was long.
Like it's a lengthy movie. And I did feel like there were elements of it where I was like, I don't know that it had to be there, and the movie could still stand on its own and maybe be like a little bit shorter. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say that I'm like venturing into like a critique or a complaint necessarily, but like, obviously we finally, after how many predictions, I mean, it's maybe like second to Mephisto, is Adam Warlock.
Oh yeah.
Like that name has come up on so many occasions.
He's here.
Yeah, he's here. We have him. The inclusion of those characters was something where I was like, okay, you learn that the High Evolutionary was able to literally like create these people, and included with those people is Adam Warlock, who is insanely powerful, and it was his character was really like funny and goofy, and they did some interesting bits with it, but that was maybe the only aspect of the film where I felt like. Like I said earlier, like I wasn't thinking the whole time like, oh, how will it fit into the greater MCU or anything like that.
Right.
Adam Warlock was maybe the exception to that, where it was kind of like, surely he's so powerful. I mean, he's got to be like Captain Marvel level like abilities.
I guess so. I don't know that much about it. He did feel like a character where it was like, he felt like a little bit like a homework character or something, where you're like, am I supposed to know more about this guy? Because I've heard the name Adam Warlock a lot, and I feel like he's normally associated with the Soul Stone, and he was sort of like the grand reveal at the end of the Guardians 2 movie, I think. So it was like, oh, okay, this guy's sort of a big deal. I think he's like, he's normally was built to like be the perfect being or whatever, which is I guess sort of what the High Evolutionary is going for. I'm not sure he's always built by the High Evolutionary though.
Right,
but
okay.
Nonetheless, he was there. He was sort of built under the same circumstances, but then he's just sort of seemed like a little dim-witted, but still very powerful. And there's really like the funny scene. So like obviously sort of like throughout the film, he basically starts as like a henchman for the High Evolutionary, and he's like clearly beating up the Guardians and all the rest of everything. And then I think what you're supposed to be getting within the Guardians movie is like a small arc as to how the next time you see Adam Warlock,
who and what kind of character he will be. And
Right.
the way that they do it, I thought was just like ridiculously like on the nostrils. But they have the like the creation of Adam moment.
Yeah.
Like where like, you know, Star-Lord and his fingers are like doing like the almost touch thing. And
Right.
he basically like, you know, like has witnessed enough of like what and who the Guardians are that maybe he's kind of like, I prefer this method to what I was doing before.
I mean, it's a very on the nose sort of thing because like earlier in the movie they say like portions of the galaxy consider him like a god or something.
Right.
And like
yes.
and he did create Adam Warlock, the High Evolutionary, but then you have Star-Lord who in the when they remake the painting, it's like then Star-Lord would be like the one who really creates him.
Yes,
you
so
know, and it's like and by creating him, like giving him like something to care about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like what Star-Lord stands for feels like will be imprinted onto
Right.
Adam Warlock's character as we go forth. So that was like one thing, and I'll be very curious to see like what they do with it. I like the casting. The guy from Maze Runner. I cannot believe the glow up on that dude.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
just like gone from, I don't even know. I feel like he's been like a child actor. We've seen him for years, and now he's this.
Now it's this guy, Adam Warlock.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So he looked incredible. I thought that was pretty cool. Although I cannot. The other thing I kept thinking about, I was like, his makeup chair must just be like he must have like a mortgage on that space because of how
So
much he
gold.
must have lived there.
Yeah.
You know, like so gold. And I feel like if it was me and I was like, okay, and maybe Dave Bautista has this exact or Gamora.
Gamora.
You know, like where so much is involved with it. But it's like if this character ends up being prominent in the future of Marvel movies, it's like I'm gonna be gold.
All the time.
Just a lot.
Yep, just a lot.
Yeah, so maybe they'll do the thing where they put him in the suit at the end. It's like, okay, then we can only just do
then
his
we just have
head.
to do your face.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes it look
Hey, you're wearing long sleeves.
a little bit smoother.
Giving you the Schofield treatment there.
Yeah, that's a Prison Break reference.
Yes, it
wow,
is.
that's a deep cut. Okay, but so the other piece of the story that I felt like maybe you could have cut out, and while I didn't have a problem with it in particular, it was like again kind of a long movie. Didn't know that it like really added a whole lot. Was Sean Gunn's character, whose name I can just literally Kraglin.
Kraglin and Cosmo.
Yes.
Yeah.
That whole narrative was like, it was fun in like the moment where Cosmo takes like the two giant slabs of earth and like pancakes.
Yeah.
You know, and that was like, that was pretty
was
dang
awesome.
fun. And I was like, I like almost got up from a chair like woo,
Yeah.
woo. You know, I was like, that was awesome. That being said though, like, obviously he's trying to like sort of like learn the ways of like Yondu's
the arrow. Yeah.
And it was kind of like, I was like, we spent at least a few minutes of screen time on that whole thing, and it like there's probably would have been other ways to like go about it and not have that be the case.
Yeah. I think it was like I was been thinking about it, why they put that particular like so much emphasis on like you called me a bad dog, please take it back.
Yes.
Like running gag, because you're right. That was sort of every time they came back to him, that was sort of the joke they were going to again.
Right.
And to me, that was like eventually they're like playing poker, and Cosmo was still going on about it. And they're like, just drop it,
Right.
Like you gotta just apologize, man, or do whatever. Like someone stop the dog. And to me, it was like that was like the very like we're gonna make sure everyone gets like the spoon-fed message of the movie, which is just like, yes, like one bad thing happened in your past and you need to stop letting it define literally every moment of the rest of your existence.
That's a fair way to put it.
Which is like that's like the very like light version. You see the entire arc of it happen in the movie. Like Cosmo was called a bad dog once and like cannot drop it and lets it affect every interaction until it is resolved.
Right, and then you've got like Peter Quill, who's like taking over Gamora, and so it's like
so they're all the rest of them are just sort of doing that same thing on a much more like several movie arc.
Yes, yeah. No, that's a really good point as well. Is that it's sort of like at some point you almost need to leave, aspects of these things that are holding you back in the past.
Yeah, I mean, there was very much, I even wrote this down, I was like, there was like your dark past doesn't have to dictate every moment of your present.
Right,
Seeing going on. So yeah, Quill, he needs to like go home and see his actual family, and then he also, just because he was happy with Gamora doesn't mean that the only way to be happy is with Gamora.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good point.
And then Rocket, we already sort of covered, just because he didn't ask to be made and was made by a bad man doesn't mean he's a bad thing. Drax, almost the same thing. Like,
don't
Drax,
even get me started. I even see what you have written, and it's gonna kill me to hear you say it.
Oh, I know.
This is what got my watermarks going in the movie.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't see it coming either. But it's like, just because his family was killed by Thanos doesn't mean he isn't a good dad.
Oh my gosh,
that was like, because then you see him like still being with the kids, and it was like,
the at the end where they have that line where it's like, you're not supposed to be Drax the Destroyer, you're supposed to be Drax, and like they got to that part in the sentence, I was like, I know what they're gonna say, and then they did, and I was like, no. I don't know. That could just be like, fairly new parent in me, but like that was definitely like oh my gosh.
Yeah. Then I thought very, very interesting switch is that Nebula was not going through this, I didn't think.
Oh yeah, good point.
Like Nebula sort of had like already embraced this concept like over the rest of the MCU, like having been built by Thanos and stuff. And so like in this complete 180 twist, Nebula is like the most emotionally stable one of the group, which has not been the case ever. Right. And it's like she's sort of having to like guide them through them, and like I thought that was like a very good way to show the growth of her character.
There was and it's funny because there's that line where like they like Quill comments on her eyes or whatever, and he's like, my father gave me these as a way to like torture or something. It was a nice shade. But then like later when she's reviewing like what happened to Rocket, she's even like, my situation was nothing like this,
Right.
And I mean, not to like diminish like anybody else's, trauma. It's like, you don't compare trauma. That's not how it works or anything. But I did and do think that shows like a lot of the growth that Nebula has gone through, that she was able to even like set aside her own stuff and show compassion for someone else's hardship.
Yeah.
It like, cause you're right. Yeah. Like, I mean, she was oddly almost like a beacon of like hope or like positivity or like the most together of the group, and it's Nebula.
I know, and it's like you're the one who's normally just like on the edge about to kill someone at every second.
Right, yeah. Or even like when Drax is like, we're gonna go kill a bunch of people. It's like no, it's like we're gonna go kill some people. It's like, we're gonna kill at least one guy that no one cares about and doesn't have a family. It's like that feels like it normally is like Nebula's approach. It's like let's go and choose violence first and then clean up after.
Right.
Yeah. So no, that's a great observation.
Yeah, I also thought it was just amazing. Like it seemed like in almost every fight they were in, it was like, oh man, once you make Nebula a good guy, I see why she had to be a bad guy, because she just wins every fight.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, you make a good villain because it's hard for them to beat you, but when you're just on the other side, it's like unfair.
Right. That being said, goodness gracious, man, one of the scenes that I thought was amazing, and like I've slowly grown to realize this as time goes on, but like action scenes, surprisingly, despite like the function of the scene itself, can typically be quite boring. Like action, you find yourself like acclimated to like boom, bang, pow, like explosions like very quickly. So like in order to make it engaging, you have to be very creative with it. And there's the one scene where like the Guardians go full Guardians, and like Groot's got like his arms running through and Rocket's running along.
Like in the hallway fight.
Yeah, the hallway fight.
Oh man, that was so fun.
I was like every single second of it, I was like, yes!
Boom! Yeah, that was really good because they are like so severely outnumbered, and they give like each character their like money shot, time to shine. And it's like, you're right, it's like why did that work so well in that moment? And I think part of it was because like this is the movie, it's like you could feel the movie saying to you, the audience, like, okay, this is like our farewell to the Guardians big fight. Everyone's gonna get a huge moment to shine. Like you are going to see your favorite character kick some butt right now.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, and so like I said earlier as well, like while I wasn't thinking about the greater MCU, I do think something from the greater MCU was like distilled and placed into this movie, which is like what the Avengers films typically accomplish by having such a massive ensemble cast. And I've always been impressed with the Avengers movies is that like every single character has like an important role in the story, and like nobody ever feels like they're just sort of like, and also Thor did something, right? It's like no, like every single one of these A-list actors all had their moment to go in and do something like really, really cool. And as an ensemble from the very beginning, I think Guardians has always been pretty good at this anyway. But like a film that revolved around Rocket, of course, like it still had plenty of time for each of the characters. And in that scene in particular, I feel like it's on like grand display. It's just sort of like, we're going to give you a awesome epic moment or fight sequence with all of them. And all of them. And they're all going to be good. They're all going to be cool. Like every character like really feels like they had like something meaningful to contribute. I think possibly you have a similar note to this, and so let me know what you thought. The one possible earmark on that could be Groot as a character. It seemed like maybe a smaller role.
He did, yeah. So like, we talked about how like your dark past doesn't have to dictate every moment of your future. It's like, yeah, Groot didn't really have that. He's just sort of also there.
Right.
Yeah. He's not. His character development wasn't as great. He sort of had that like thing going though, like where he can't really appear the same size in any movie.
Oh yeah,
so he's been like adult Groot and then baby Groot and then
like
teenage Groot and now he's like bulky Groot and then at the end he's like Colossus Groot. But it's always funny about that. But he doesn't. I guess it's hard because he can't say that much.
I know. So that's a really. I'm glad you actually even like teed me up for this with that exact sentiment. But we were talking about this a little bit in office this morning and trying to sort of get like a better feel for like the whole like I am Groot language, because it does seem like from the very beginning it was pretty much like Rocket could understand like what Groot was saying and pretty much had to translate for everybody else. And like as time goes on, like clearly the rest of the Guardians were starting to like know what he was saying as well. There's obviously that really kind of like funny scene where Thor, I think in Infinity War, like says he took Groot as like an elective.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a throwaway, like, oh yeah, okay, like that's funny. Like now you can understand Groot too.
Right.
But then throughout this movie, I thought the whole Gamora Groot thing was hysterical.
Yeah.
Which was like, she was like, all right, you guys are making up like responses to what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
Like, like he's not actually saying anything. But then two things. One is that at the end of the movie, in true Vin Diesel fashion, he says, I love you guys. Which it felt like very like Fast and the Furious, like
family.
Yeah. For some reason, I really want like Vin Diesel to be in the live action Lilo and Stitch so that he can say Ohana means family. Like to anybody. That's like I'm going into my Vin Diesel fandom here.
Yeah. The Vin Diesel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, exactly. The VDCU.
Yeah.
But like so at the end, obviously he says another sentence, and in the first Guardians film, this is sort of like reflecting the like we are Groot.
Yeah.
Like the first piece of it, but this was a huge departure. Like we are Groot was changing one word and basically saying the same thing. This was saying like all new words, which then could go a couple of ways. And one of the things that we discussed here was almost like in the film Avatar: Way of Water.
Yeah.
You have the moment where like essentially they have like a narration of Jake, I think, saying something like, and before long you didn't even realize that we were hearing the Na'vi language.
It all just sounded like English. And then for the rest of the movie, they just speak in English because, the audience doesn't want to read subtitles.
The whole time, yeah. So it's like, basically it's like, we're not going to speak in Na'vi the whole time, and you'll know that they're speaking to each other in Na'vi, but we hear it in English.
Right.
And so the question sort of became like what is that relationship like with Groot? Because the other thing at the end is that Gamora finally does understand what Groot is saying. And so the hypothesis that I think Kat in Office said was like maybe it's one of those things where like if you like love or appreciate Groot, then you hear what he's saying, not just the words I am Groot.
Right. You could say that, but then you have to consider Thor's like, I took Groot as an elective.
And that's like one of those where it's like, maybe it's fine for that to have just been a funny like thing Thor said and like let the canon exist in a way that's like, yeah, we're not going to hold Thor to that because Thor's just Thor.
Right. So then there's like, so the question is, when he says, I love you guys, did he actually say I am Groot? And this is like the movie's way of communicating with the audience that you, the audience, now understand Groot.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
And that's in my mind, like that's the version of it that I think I like the best.
Yeah. I don't like him being able to say other words.
Yes. Yeah.
No. Like if you want to say that because we've gotten to know Groot over 6 or 7 movies now, that now we understand it, then I'm with you for that.
Yes, and I think that's the thing. But don't like, show us the future Guardians movie led by Rocket, with all the rest, and Groot just speaks like full sentences to everybody all the time. Because I do think that there's a chance you would end up diminishing the overall charm. Because otherwise it's this fun contextualized thing where it's like he says something and then you get to figure out what he said based on how everybody else reacts. And I feel like that's like part of what makes the whole character work. It's obviously the most iconic aspect of Groot.
On that note though, I thought it was very fun to finally see him back in like full fighting as a tree form and like taking advantage. Because like in the first Guardians movie, there are so many times where it's like, boy, it's a good thing they had Groot, because he's a little OP. He can do a little too much almost, it seems sometimes.
Right.
And then they're like, yeah, okay, so the next movie he's just a baby and he can't really do anything. And then after that, it's like, yeah, so he's just gonna shoot stuff with guns now,
right?
Instead of like be a tree most of the time. But it's like, no, but it's still important that he's a tree because he makes the hammer for Thor. So it's still important that he's a tree. That's why it's important. But otherwise, guns. And this time it's like, no, he's just big. He's a big fighting tree again. Let's go.
Yeah. And there was like plenty of little minions and stuff for him to fight. So that was all pretty awesome. Although I really did like coming into this movie, especially being like what feels like the finale of Guardians, because at the end they said like the legendary Star-Lord will return, which made me feel like maybe we won't have another Guardians of the Galaxy film, but maybe we'll see those characters show back up. I don't know exactly how that will play out.
It seemed weird that, or I bet they just have like a new name or something.
Could be.
Like maybe they're not called the Guardians anymore. But it seemed weird that they would like give you this one scene of like, all right, here's Cosmo, a character you just kind of finally got to know, and here's Adam Warlock, and here's Giant Groot, and here's this other girl. We're not even gonna tell you her name.
Right.
Like, Phyla, that's her name.
Phyla, okay.
Yeah. Like, here they go! Like, it seemed weird that they would show you that and then be like, we just won't see them again.
Right.
Because, like, clearly, like, they're not gonna just, like, not have Adam Warlock in there in any more movies or something. So
it's true.
I don't know if they'd just be called something else or whatever, but otherwise it was very much like a farewell to the Guardians, at least, or it's like, was it a farewell to the Guardians as a whole, or this version of the Guardians, or something like? But and then because at the end it does just say the legendary Star-Lord will return.
Right. So then that was sort of like another one where you sort of get to the end of the movie, and I don't know like exactly how I felt about it, because like I don't know if I fully comprehend what they were trying to do yet, but they sort of like show you where all of the various characters are going, and it's sort of like, this is like where everybody lands, and everybody's like kind of found their purpose, and they will go and like like fulfill that purpose in some capacity.
Right.
So obviously, very notably, you've got Peter Quill going back to Earth.
Yep.
And he is going to like see his family and stuff, which is like, for one, it was kind of like, obviously his mother passed away when he was very young, and that's like a traumatic event that he needed to like process and like digest in some capacity so that he can go on to like, mature as a person and be more at peace, like, with himself and everything. But as they have him go into the home, it almost felt like, they had the door open and they had the woman answer the door, and he's like, I might be in the wrong spot. I'm looking for, like my grandfather. And he's like, oh, and she's like, oh, he's right over here. Yeah. And like, there's this like reveal moment where you like see the grandfather, and it's like, who is it? And so this was like a really funny thing. And I'd like asked everybody in the office this morning, because I was like, I feel like I missed the trick. Like, was I supposed to understand that like, oh, that's who they got to be the grandfather? Because literally, and I was wrong about this, so this is not the case, but I was like, is it Kevin Feige, who is like the like the puppeteer of all of like the MCU so far? And I was like, oh, is this going to be like a new thing? Like they'll have like kind of similar to like the Stan Lee cameo. It's like Kevin Feige has done so much for Marvel as a brand, and he's kind of been the figurehead, the one at the center of everything. I was like, oh, is that going to be like the thing? Is it going to be like Kevin Feige is now going to have like a cameo in each of the films, and this was like the first foray into it? And it's like, nope, it was just the guy who played him in Guardians 2, and it was like, oh, well, that's fine too. But like, it was like one of these things where like, I felt like it was like a camera pan. It's like, oh, and who's his grandfather? And it's like, it's this guy.
It's his grandpa. Yeah.
Okay.
Just a guy, I guess.
Just a guy, I guess. Yeah. So
did you see the newspaper he was reading?
Yes.
In the post credits.
Yes, it had the Kevin Bacon.
The Kevin Bacon
That's
thing.
Pretty amazing.
That's pretty good.
Do you think that Peter went on to mow that lawn?
Oh. Probably.
Who do you think the deadbeat son is?
Oh.
Do you feel like that's like it's gonna be someone?
You think so? He said he was like a 45-year-old son, right?
Right.
Was that it? Man, who would it be? Who could it even be?
I don't know.
That he wouldn't recognize. That'd be so funny. Yeah, because that actually is an important person.
Right. Yeah.
I'll mow the lawn if you want me to. It's just. You have a son right there. Unless you're gonna sit there on the porch and watch me.
Right, yeah. It was
Don't
like,
get me started.
Okay, yeah. Oh no! Now I kind of want to know.
I know.
Yeah, it was a very funny, and like I almost felt like Marvel was playing with the audience a little bit as well, because there is of course the constant, like, you get to the end of the movie and you probably need to go to the bathroom because you've had your snacks and drinks and everything throughout the entire time, and you're waiting all 15 minutes for the credits to roll through just so you can see what new piece of glimmer they're going to give you. And it was largely Chris Pratt chewing cereal.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it was
like, let the cereal sounds go on forever.
Yeah, they were like, enjoy that one,
there
kids.
You go. Glad you stayed for the post credits, but you still have to next time, because maybe.
Because you never know.
You never know what we're gonna do.
We've given you some morsels in there, so maybe there will be more. Okay. The other big one about like any Guardians movie is of course going to be the music.
Yeah.
One of the things, and again, I'm not going to call this a critique because I don't think that my own personal taste in music is high enough level that I feel like I could critique something on it. I did feel like the music was a little bit less iconic to me in that, like, I didn't hear all the songs and think like, yay, they used this one.
Right.
And what especially got me was towards the end, they've got is it a Zoom? Is that the name of like the old player?
Is that what they're using as a Zune?
A Zune. Was it called a Zune? Yeah. But they clearly scroll up a decade to like the 2000s, and like, you know, the little button press was very nostalgic, like that noise, like like, you know, it sounded really good. I don't know what I expected the song for the 2000s to be, but like, having been, you know, I like in the year 2000, I would have been like 11, you know, so it would be like, you're really talking about like an era of time where like I would have been prime audience
exposed
for like,
to a lot of music.
And it was like the song started playing and I was like, do I know this song?
I didn't know it until it got like a little further into it.
I knew that, once it got to like the chorus, it was like, oh yeah, okay, of course, you know, like everybody's having a good time and it was fun and everything. And I did think it was good, but I was like, was that the 2000s iconic song that I expected them to pick?
Right, yeah. I don't know. I thought that too, because it's a Guardians movie, you're paying a little bit more attention to the music. Whereas like I got out of Guardians 1 and I was like, well, I'm downloading the soundtrack right now. Like I wasn't like rushing to go download the Volume 3 soundtrack after I got out of the theater. But I mean, the music was still good. I like how they went back to Come and Get Your Love at the very end.
Yeah, that was
as
cool.
well. That was good because that's like, you know, the sort of intro Star-Lord song.
Right. Well,
like, they're doing it again. Yay, that's fun.
It's back.
Yeah. So that was cool. That was also my wedding song, so yeah, it was fun.
That is fun. Yeah. I feel like the Guardians 1 soundtrack was like your whole wedding soundtrack.
Yeah, entirely. It was. Yeah, it was sort of like a big theme, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. But music in general, I even felt like they gave it sort of like its moment, because like really at the end of the day, like we said at the beginning, the whole plot of the movie is driven forth by their objective and goal to go and get somebody from their team, or to save someone from their
Rocket,
team. You know, and so it's like really like a no man left behind. Like we will all put our lives on the line in order to like make this a reality, and nobody is questioning whether or not it's worth it. And I felt like a lot of kind of like what you're saying is like living a little bit more in the moment and in the now. Like that is like what music represents, and I feel like it's played this huge and significant role for the Guardians as an entity across the board. And I thought one of the cool things was almost having Star-Lord run back and basically risk his life in the name of that music.
Yeah, to get the music.
You know, like...
Yeah, that was a really cool touch. They used it effectively in like a bunch of different ways too. Like in Infinity War, I think you can see, like when they go to space,
yes,
you can see like Gamora like singing along to, I think, Rubber Band Man. Is that what it is?
I think so. That sounds right.
Rubber Man. That's what it is.
Okay.
Yeah. Rubber Man.
We're not good at music.
We're not good at music. Yeah, I don't know if you ever listened to the pop, but we are not. Anyway, but so, and it like I always really love that she's like singing along to it, because it's just sort of like she's like really like adopted Peter's thing.
Right,
like,
yes.
You know, it's like, it's not just that she's putting up with it, she's like embracing
She's
it.
like, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, which is like always like has way more impact. And then so like this movie opens almost the same way, with Rocket like listening to the music and like singing along with it. And you're like, even Rocket has embraced the music.
Right, yes.
Yeah. So that's pretty good.
So clearly, yeah, and that's the thing, is like music is definitely being used as like the like this is this like music in general is like what it means to like live inside of I think the moment,
right,
or just like enjoy yourself in some capacity. So I thought that was a pretty cool little tidbit for them to include there at the end. Although having, I like a couple of times, yeah. So I think I almost said this earlier. Like coming into this movie, especially being like the potential like air quotes finale for the Guardians, arena. Like they had the situation very early on where like Groot basically has his entire body cut off, and you're like, they just kill Groot, like because if they just kill Groot, everyone is dying.
Oh yeah, that was sort of the question, because a lot of the trailers and the marketing were like, "Say goodbye to the Guardians, one last ride," and you're like, "What are they gonna? Are they gonna die?"
They wouldn't do. And like so you basically get to the end though, and of course this is like one of those like very very far back in the back of your mind thing where it's like maybe Chris Pratt wants to go and do other projects or something, but so pretty much when they have him floating there in space at the end and his face is like doing the whole thing, you're like, well, did he just die? Like,
right. Well, it's like it was pretty effective with the marketing, because like there is this like hint at like maybe they're all gonna die, and they're like they have Cosmo holding the ships together, and like they're getting everyone across, and like you're sort of noticing like none of them have jumped across yet. Like they're all still on the wrong side of the ship. Is this gonna be like their final act? And then like no, but then Quill goes back, and it's like maybe he's just gonna die, and then it's like but no.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of little fake out things there.
A couple fake outs.
I thought the whole I guess like Star-Lord is like the main character of the Guardians movies, but it felt like obviously for this one in particular, like Rocket definitely was like much more like the main narrative was being driven forward by his character.
Yes, definitely.
But there was like this weird like the last 15 minutes I feel like they did like, okay, Rocket's story is pretty much wrapped up, let's pivot over to Star-Lord, the main character, and give him some screen time.
Yeah.
It's like wait, what? Shouldn't it maybe be Rocket floating in space or something that we're like all worried about because the movie was about him? Why are we like? Why is it suddenly Star-Lord?
And it's a fair question. And even like when it came down to it, like they swing the other way again. Like they're sort of like letting you know where all the characters end at the end of all of everything, and they're like, okay, and of course it's all agreed that Rocket is the new captain, and that was another one of those where I was like, is that what? Have they been like teasing it was it always like going to be like Rocket or Star-Lord to be like the leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy?
Right.
There was I had the easiest little bit of like the like Game of Thrones, like Bran is the
true king.
The true king type thing. It was like, all right. Sure. like I get that. I mean, obviously, like I said, I freaking loved the whole Rocket Raccoon story and like everything to do with like how he came about. And I thought it was all perfect. I wouldn't have changed a thing. I was just sort of like, okay, sure. Yeah. I mean, like, is this just going to be the new Guardians? Like, was Bradley Cooper just like, dude, if you guys want me to keep coming back, I'll do this until I'm blue in the face.
Right.
Like
Nebula.
Or Star-Lord when he froze to death twice.
Okay, let me ask you this. Did you think, because they also put this in the trailers, and it felt like a joke in the trailers, but then as I was watching the movie, I was like, are they actually going to do the Peter Nebula romance thing?
Oh, I wondered about that as well. Like, and I didn't know what they would do with that particular situation, because it really did not seem like once you get like a good like 45 minutes to an hour into this movie, it was like they're not really building you up for a situation where it's Gamora.
Yeah.
And even at the end when he was out freezing in space, I was like, this is originally like what happened with Gamora.
Yeah.
And I was like, because he like takes his like mask off to give to her. And I was like, are they like, I was like, I don't think if Gamora's the one who saves him, I don't think that they've set it up quite well enough that I would be like, oh, okay, so they're back together, or now together, depending on your perspective on alternate Gamora.
Right.
So that was a fake out, I felt like, to have it be Adam Warlock instead. And they did have the really hilarious moment where he's
and he's
like, and like Star-Lord's face is all like,
oh, gross. Yeah, looking. So there was that. But yeah, I felt like I couldn't tell if this was like falling into their like trailer trap or something, but like knowing they had like their one little, like, because in the trailer it comes off like, obviously they're not gonna like go, be together, because that'd be weird. But then like you're watching the movie and it's like she's the one who's like taking care of him at the beginning, and then they have a line like, she only calls me Star-Lord when she's angry or something.
Right.
And it's like, maybe there's a little something there. And then like when they do that, like he's like And he immediately starts striking out with Gamora, and then they all put on their little funny colored spacesuits, which, by the way, the buttons on the spacesuit, those are the funniest things in the whole movie. Like, blue is an open channel. And then, like, all the colors mean the wrong colors. I thought it was intuitive.
Red is green, yellow is blue.
Anyway, though, I bring it up because Nebula is wearing a green suit and Gamora is wearing a blue suit. And it was like, are they doing like a swap to be like, yeah, see, because Quill's going after the wrong girl, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I was like, is that what's going on here?
A little bit of a setup for it.
But then it sort of fizzles after the Orgathorpe thing. Like, there's no more development of it.
Maybe it's like an arc that, like, you know, either we haven't seen it go all the way, or they were like, people aren't going to be willing to accept this quickly. Like, you know, you can't start the movie like you getting wasted over Gamora, and then by the end of it be like, hey, Nebula, you're also here.
Right.
Like, you know, it's like let them establish like a multi-film, you know, like something or another, if that's so. I don't really know. Like, I had the same question going into it, and maybe that was like one of those things where they were again trying to like get hit channels like this one to be like, will Star-Lord and Nebula end up together? ? Clickable thumbnail. You're probably gonna have to make that now so that people can see what our version of it would have looked like. Only to then just literally not have it be a factor at all, and it's like, why would you read into that? That has nothing to do with the themes of the movie, and that wouldn't happen. So I can see some of that happening, because I do think that there's a little bit of gamemanship happening between people who make trailers and people who break down trailers. Yeah, and wanting to make the trailer look epic and be an accurate representation of the film while also leading people down the wrong paths. Yeah. I feel
there's
like
an art to it.
We've watched enough and tried to predict enough things at this point in time that I'm like, the people who make trailers are at this point in time part of like they are in the arena, right? You know, like they're doing the whole thing too. So possibly a bit of that was going on. All that being said, I feel like we've talked for a good long while at this point. We do have a few reviews that I want to read from our Quizmasters over on Patreon before we give our scores. From Chase, it says, it was amazing. I love the blend of dark and light themes. I genuinely think it was the best or second best MCU movie.
Oh, so, man, really high praise from Chase.
Yeah. Amazing.
I wonder what it thinks is the best one.
I know, that's a good question.
Or second best one.
Infinity War. That's my... Ooh, Ragnarok. Hard to say.
They're
both great. Snape's Cat says, I found the gene splicing creepy, but otherwise enjoyed the movie. Made me laugh and cry. I give it an 88. Oh. And finally, Greg Lamont says, humor and heartbreak throughout. It hits all the notes a franchise finale should. Eventually, we will emotionally recover from what this movie just put us through, but not yet.
Oh, man, that's a pretty good one, Greg. It does hit like a lot of humor and a lot of emotion, and it does feel like the finale. So yes. Yeah, check.
Yes, absolutely. That being said, where did you land on it? I feel like I've given it some pretty high praise.
I landed it right at an 87.
An 87.
Yep, so
beautiful.
Pretty high up there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. To be honest with you, I think that you and Snape's Cat right there were right in the same zip code as me. Yep. I will lean ever so slightly higher for once, and I would give it an 89.
An 89. Boom.
89, yeah.
Wow. Ben's favorite Marvel movie all year, maybe.
Maybe.
I think probably all year. Yeah. It's definitely my favorite Marvel movie since Spider-Man.
That's probably a good way to put it. I really had a good time with this
I don't know what I gave other movies a score, so if this was lower, then let me just say I liked this more than every other movie that wasn't Spider-Man.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that's how we retroactively like rate the curves. Yeah. It's like you gotta like figure out how does everything compare to one another. I really what it came down to for me was I just thought it was like I didn't even think of it as a Marvel movie. I was like, this was a great Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
That, you know what, this is another, I think that's probably another great way to like compare it to like Quantumania, whereas like Ant-Man and Ant-Man 1 or Ant-Man 2 felt like these are Ant-Man movies. Yeah. And then like Ant-Man 3 felt like this was a MCU movie. Right. Whereas it wasn't as much of an Ant-Man movie. Whereas this was just like, it was Guardians, and there was Guardians 2, and there was Guardians 3, and they were all Guardians movies, so stuck with it.
Yeah. I feel like there's definitely like, and I think maybe James Gunn has just got like his finger totally on the pulse for like this style, brand, like theme of humor, even I would say like I said before, like I would say Thor Ragnarok would be up there for me as like one of my all-time favorites. And I felt like with Thor Love and Thunder, it almost felt like it took the Ragnarok formula and maybe like exponentially dragged it up, whereas this felt more of like a progressive incline. It was just sort of like each subsequent movie was that much more like now you know a flavor of like how these characters behave and act, and the style of humor that we're going to use, and what's weird and what's not, and like what's cool, and how they like, you know, the snarkiness and all the rest. And it felt like it just continued, like a natural progression. So I really enjoyed that. And like I said, I mean, a lot of the stuff in this movie, if you had showed me out of context, I would have been like, that is kind of gross.
A little weird.
They make
it work.
Yeah, they do make it work. They make it work. So fun time all around. I'm very curious to see what you guys at home thought. Be sure to let us know in the towel section down below.
Yeah, and if you want to see our reviews of other Marvel movies, you can check out this one where we review Black Panther, Wakanda Forever.
Heyo!
What?
Good times.
Otherwise, until next time,
bye!